Hello and welcome to the IRB Researcher Training for Northeastern State University. This presentation will serve as investigator training for the NSU IRB. Anyone conducting research considered by the NSU IRB will be required to acknowledge that he or she has participated in this short training on their application. The purpose of this presentation is to acquaint you, the researcher, with the purpose and processes for conducting research involving humans. The Institutional Review Board, usually called the IRB, assures that researchers take appropriate steps to protect the rights and welfare of humans participating as subjects in research projects. Researchers at Northeastern State University, faculty, staff, students, and anyone associated with NSU who may use NSU property or sites to conduct research are required to have their research projects involving human participants approved by the IRB before beginning any aspect of their research. Failure to do so is considered research misconduct. If you are uncertain about whether the investigation you plan to conduct meets the requirements of human subject research, ask yourself the following questions. 1. Are you collecting data through interaction or intervention with a live human? Or 2, are you collecting identifiable private information? If you answered yes to either question, your research needs to be approved by the NSU IRB. If you still aren't certain whether your project needs IRB review, contact the IRB chair. To begin the IRB review process, complete the IRB Researcher Training, available on the website and through a link in the research application. Complete the application and compile all information into a single document. Submit the application electronically as an email attachment to irb@nsu.edu. You will receive an automatic email confirming receipt of your application. The IRB chair will then assign your application an IRB number, determine the level of review, exempt, expedited, or full board, send your research team a request for electronic signatures, and send the application to the board for review. The review process typically takes about 2 to 4 weeks, unless the project requires review by the full board at their monthly meeting. Check the IRB website for meeting dates and due dates for projects requiring full IRB review. The IRB may deny approval or reject your application, require you to make certain changes, or approve the research application as submitted. In any case, do not start recruiting participants or collecting data until you have received email notification that your application has been approved by the IRB. Now we will examine each part of the IRB research application. The information in this presentation will be most helpful to you if you have an electronic or hard copy of the IRB research application available as you view this presentation. The presentation is organized according to the sections of the application. We did not include screenshots of the application so that the presentation will be current and relevant if we make changes to the content or format of the application. You should always use the most current version of the IRB application from the IRB website homepage or application section. Access a current copy of the IRB application from https://offices.nsuok.edu/IRB. You may also go to the main university page at www.nsuok.edu and do a search for the IRB. Your landing page will have the most current version of the application form. Part 1. Investigators and Key Research Personnel. In Part 1, identify all investigators and key research personnel and complete the contact information sections. Be sure that you provide an accurate NSU email address or institutional email address for persons outside of NSU. This is important for 2 reasons. First, the IRB chair will include everyone listed on the application on emails regarding the status of and questions regarding the application. Second, all investigators and key personnel will have to provide electronic signatures originating from their institutional email addresses to authenticate their signatures. The IRB chair will also verify that all investigators have completed the research training. While all investigators must affirm with an electronic signature that they will adhere to IRB rules, the principal investigator, or PI, is responsible for communicating the terms of the approved application to all investigators. While NSU students may serve and typically do serve as the PI, student projects must be supervised by a faculty sponsor. Part 2, Funding Information. Provide complete information about all funding sources for this research project, including pending sources. Select Not Applicable and move to the next section if your research is not supported with internal or external funding, typically in the form of grants or contracts. Attach a complete copy of the funding proposal submitted to the sponsor to the end of the application. Submission of your grant application is a regulatory requirement that will be retained as part of your IRB research application. You must submit all necessary documentation for this application, such as consent forms and survey questionnaires, in addition to the copy of the grant, even if those forms are included in the grant application. Please note that you must consolidate all of your IRB application materials into a single document. So convert your research proposal and IRB application into the necessary formats so that you can attach the funding proposals to the end of the IRB application. Part 3, Administrative Data. Administrative data asks for several important pieces of information. First, provide the start date or select upon IRB approval. Please refer to the meeting section of the IRB website for application due dates and IRB meetings so that you can plan accordingly. Next, indicate the project type such as student course, project or honors project, a student thesis or capstone, student optometry project, or faculty research project. Indicate whether medical clearance or screening is necessary, and if it is, answer the follow-up questions about the clearance and screening. Study sites refer to where you are recruiting participants and/or conducting the study. Select all the options that apply. Please note that if you are conducting research somewhere other than one of the NSU campuses, it is highly likely that you will be required to arrange for a site permission letter from an authorized representative to be sent to the IRB chair before the study is approved. Take care to carefully consider whether your research involves any potential vulnerable populations. These include children, defined as under 18 years of age, pregnant women, elderly, defined as 65 or older, psychologically impaired, cognitively impaired, prisoners, Native American tribes and/or tribal organizations, and students enrolled in a class in which the instructor is the investigator in the study. If your target population includes one or more of these groups, include each group in your application. Inclusion of these groups requires full board review. This should not discourage you from doing research with the protected population. From time to time, projects require oversight from other institutions, such as the Optometry Student Projects Committee, Cherokee Nation IRB, or other tribal oversight committees, or other institutional IRBs. If you think or know that other IRBs might need to approve your project, contact the IRB chair to discuss the order and process for obtaining approval from each group. Finally, it is important to disclose any potential or perceived conflict of interest associated with the investigators, funding sponsors, and/or Northeastern State University. The IRB application contains a link to corresponding policies on the IRB website for more information. Research conducted at sites outside of NSU, including public schools or school districts, typically require written approval from an appropriate representative prior to IRB approval. The site approval letter must be on official letterhead and signed by the appropriate representative. Investigators may arrange for a site to fax or mail the letter directly or obtain the letter from the site and mail it to the IRB chair. Scanned copies of site permission letters are not acceptable. In recent years, the most common way to grant site permission has been electronically. This can be done by a person with the authority to grant site permission to email the IRB chair at irb@nsuok.edu from his or her official email account representing the organization granting site permission. Research involving other institutions that have their own institutional review board, including other higher educational institutions and some tribes, typically require approval by their own IRB. Have a conversation with the IRB chair about this process if you are working on your dissertation, doing research that involves the Cherokee Nation, or working with other entities that may have an IRB. Part 4 is the summary of study activities. This is the section with which most researchers have the most difficulty. Work out the details of your project before completing your IRB application so that you can explain the project clearly and completely. Write this section and the remainder of the application in language appropriate for the IRB reviewers, who are educated but not necessarily experts in your field. It is important to read each question in the application carefully and address each part completely. For example, when providing the background information, state the purpose of the study, the research question to be answered, and the hypotheses, if appropriate, to your research design. This is also the section in which you may need to provide citations from scholarly literature to support your research. The background section is typically 1 to 3 paragraphs long. The research design can typically be described in a sentence or two. Describe the potential research subjects or participants and explain your relationship to them if applicable. It is particularly important to disclose whether you are the participant's teacher, instructor, or supervisor. These relationships may increase the level of risk or perceived risk to the participants, since persons of authority may have control over participants' grades, livelihood, or other situations. Clear explanations of the relationship helps the IRB accurately weigh the potential risks to participants against the potential benefits of the study. The procedures need to be described step by step, preferably in chronological order. Be sure to include the methods of administration and data collection. For example, if you are conducting a survey, will you administer it online or in paper format? How will you get the survey to the participants? How will you retrieve the responses from the participants? If you are collecting data online, refer to the IRB policies regarding Internet research. Please note that electronic surveys typically need to be administered using checkbox or similar online software to ensure participant protection. The IRB application contains a hyperlink to the section of the IRB website with the policies regarding Internet research and more information about checkbox. Applications that state they will be using online survey software will be required to provide links to the completed surveys for board to review. Indicate the amount of time it will take participants to complete each step of the procedure, and indicate if you will ask participants to repeat any task or participate in any follow-up activities. Provide each study document, appending it to the end of the IRB application or pasting the text into the appropriate section of the IRB application. Study documents include documents that you will have participants complete, such as surveys or tests, documents that you complete as part of data collection, such as surveys, observation protocols, and interview protocols. Describe the recruitment procedures in detail. These are the steps you will take to invite people to participate in your study. Explain who will approach potential participants and what will be done to protect the individual's privacy in this process. Also provide a copy of any material used to recruit potential participants. This material may include advertisements, flyers, handouts, or cover letters that are posted publicly or delivered to potential participants electronically or by other means. If you are verbally recruiting participants, Provide the telephone scripts or verbal recruitment scripts. These scripts should detail what you will say when you contact people. Part 5 is privacy procedures. When thinking about the privacy of research participants, consider whether you will have information that would allow you to identify the research participants. Be sure to accurately use the following terms regarding privacy: anonymous, confidential, and de-identified. If the data are anonymous, then nobody, including the researchers, can identify the data to a particular research participant. One example of anonymous data is when participants complete a paper or electronic survey that does not contain any identifying information. Confidential means that there is some link that exists between the data and the individual, but the researchers do not reveal that link. For example, face-to-face interviews conducted by the researcher are not anonymous, since the researcher knows the identity of the interviewee, but the research team can protect the confidentiality of the participant by referring to participants with pseudonyms or fictitious names. Another option for protecting privacy is to de-identify the data. A researcher might initially need to identify participants in order to match data, like pre- and post-test, or participants like parent-child, or track who responded to a survey. The researcher can de-identify the data by assigning individuals a code, then destroying the code sheet that links the participant's name and code at a specified time in the research. In any case, be mindful that demographic data can inadvertently provide identifying information, especially when working with small populations, and disclose this information in your application when appropriate. Additionally, you will need to describe the data formats you will use, including videos, photographs, and electronic data, how you will collect the data, store the data in order to ensure participant privacy, and when, if, and how you will destroy the data. Part 6 is the informed consent. Informed consent is an important action in the IRB process. You must inform potential participants of the implications to them of participating in your research study, then obtain their consent to participate in the study. Communicate this information through a consent form and ongoing conversation with research participants in clear language they can understand. Consent documents should be written in lay language, free of jargon, and clearly written in language appropriate for the intended audience. Only legal adults with mental capacity to make sound decisions can give informed consent. A parent or legal guardian must give informed consent for minors or those who are unable to make decisions for themselves. However, when appropriate, research participants who cannot give informed consent should be provided with information about their participation in the study in appropriate language and ask for their assent to participate. Notice in this graphic that this assent may be verbal for children between the ages of 6 and 12 and written for minors ages 13 to 17, but that written parental consent is also required. Asking for assent shows respect for the individual person, an ethical principle of the Belmont Report on which the IRB is based. The IRB website has sample consent and assent forms. College students are considered adults even if they are not yet 18 years of age. According to federal regulations, this information must be included in a consent document. 1. A statement that the study involves research. 2. An explanation of the purposes of the research. 3. The expected duration of the person's participation. 4. A description of the procedures to be followed in terms of what you will ask participants to do or what you will do to the participants. 5. Identification of any procedures which are experimental. 6. A description of any reasonably foreseeable risk or discomforts to the participants. 7. A description of any benefits to the subject or to others which may reasonably be expected from the research. 8. a disclosure of appropriate alternative procedures or courses of treatment, if any, that might be advantageous to the participant. 9. A statement describing the extent, if any, to which confidentiality of records identifying the participant will be maintained. 10. For research involving more than minimal risk, an explanation as to the availability of medical treatment in the case of research-related injury, including who will pay for the treatment or whether other financial compensation is available. 11. An explanation of whom to contact for answers to pertinent questions about the research and research participants' rights, and whom to contact in the event of research-related injury to the subject. 12. A statement that participation is voluntary. Refusal to participate will involve no penalty or loss of benefits to which the participant is otherwise entitled, and the participant may discontinue participation at any time without penalty or loss of benefits to which the participant is otherwise entitled. Some projects may require additional information. Check the Informed Consent section of the IRB Policy and Procedures for details. Part 7 is Risks and Benefits. The core function of the IRB is to assure that researchers take appropriate steps to protect the rights and welfare of humans participating as subjects in research projects. We do this by making sure that risks to research participants are minimized, that risks to participants are reasonable in relation to anticipated benefits to participants, if any, and by evaluating if the risks to participants relative to the importance of the knowledge that may be reasonably expected to result from the study, according to the Code of Federal Regulations that guides the IRB's work, Title 45, Part 46. Your complete and detailed application will help the IRB make an informed and timely decision regarding your study. Compensation for participation in a study is certainly an acceptable way to find participants. Compensation may take many forms, but typically has been seen by the NSU IRB in the form of extra credit for participants who may be students, chances to enter drawings for gift cards, or outright payment for participation. In any circumstance, this section reminds the researcher to include this information in the informed consent document and to also address what would happen to a participant's compensation if she or he decided to withdraw from the study prior to the study's completion. Reviewers will cross-reference any compensation that involves currency in some form with information found in Part 2, Funding Information of the application. In summary, NSU's Institutional Review Board exists to ensure that researchers take appropriate steps to protect the rights and welfare of humans participating as subjects in research projects. Researchers can expedite the review process by submitting complete and detailed applications. It is critical to wait to begin recruiting participants or beginning any part of the data collection until the IRB has notified you by email of approval. Please contact the IRB chair or your college representative if you need assistance completing your application or have questions about the process.